What up, fam? Today we're going to get into some spirituality and politics. Tough discussion, but that's something that I'm going to be pushing with my next guests that are coming on. But let's get into some precursors. So, spirituality and politics. How do you navigate that? And it's a very difficult conversation to have because, especially right now, because politics is so absolutely insane that nobody wants to watch it. And, previously, I was using some terminology that I'm going to change. I'm saying politics in specific because if you watch the astrology one that I did, I asked them how or what would be the best way that they would advise for people to consume the news, and they all push back on it, and rightfully so, because the news in all reality is shit, right? You turn on the news and it's a bunch of horrible stories, and they're normally not telling you anything good. And even if you want to just follow the news just for politics, it's really subjective, right? Because depending on which news station you tie into these days, they're very polarized. You really don't have any that are doing middle of the road reporting. So news was the wrong question to answer. And what I should have asked them was, how should people, or what would be their advice toward people being involved in consuming like politics, getting informed? And that's the tough question, right? And so my personal opinion, first of all, I hate to define myself, but since we're talking politics, I kind of have to. And so I don't stand on either side. And I don't even believe that us as American citizens should be registering to be one party or the other. You should always want your representatives to fight for your vote. And when you get a bunch of pre-registered people like claiming I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican, when you have so much of that, politicians that are in the favored side are just going to get really lazy and complacent. And that's where the shit goes down, and people get taken advantage of. The system gets taken advantage of, yada, yada, yada. But that being said, I would like to refer to myself as like a pure centrist, right? So no matter what party you're from, no matter which way you slide in that party, being conservative or liberal or whatever, I would like to consider myself a pure centrist, right? I want to stand in the middle of everything, and I just want to vote for the person who has the most logical policies that they're pushing, whatever's best for America or wherever you're from, right? But I'm from America, so that's what we're talking about today. But in our world of things here in spirituality, even being a centrist, it's very hard because you're looking at both parties, all the horrible things that both of them are doing, and right now, a lot of the time, the choice is which one is the lesser of all evils, right? And that's not the idea choice that we want to be in when we're talking about picking people who are going to run our country and whatnot. And so the real question is, as you're looking at politics and all of the mayhem that's going on in politics, how do you use your spirituality to participate in all that, right? Because there's a lot of philosophies in spirituality. And first, as part of being a spiritualist, let's define what a spiritualist is, right? A spiritualist, somebody who believes that we still can commune and always have been able to commune with spirit on the other side, right? On the other side of the veil. Essentially, the easiest way to explain that would be mediumship, where you have somebody who can talk to people's dead relatives. That is a form of being a spiritualist, right? But when we say spirituality, it's a much broader definition, right? If you say I'm into spirituality and I'm a spiritualist, both those things can be right at the same time, but you don't have to necessarily be a spiritualist to be into spirituality, you know? But anyway, in the community of spirituality, you have channeling and past life regressions and all these wonderful ways that people are bringing forth truth and light. And in particularly when it's spirit, what do we get? Always the higher perspective, right? We're all the same. We get the whole oneness thing. And I understand, love that, and accept it fully. And would like to do my best to integrate that into my life. And I try to do that every day. However, if you're a Republican or a Democrat and you're spiritual, it's kind of hard because at this point you could be living across from somebody who is from the other party and would just plain and simply rather see you dead, right? You're a terrorist, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're a communist, whatever. And so even in taking the highest perspective, which is super hard to do when we're here in the 3D reality, living this life as a human, you have to make the best choice that's best for not just you, but your family and really for America. That's why I say most people shouldn't register, or no citizen should be allowed to register. Every single politician should always have to fight for your vote every single time. There should be no gimmies. And that's one of the ways that the system's rigged. They've divided the country into two parts, and those two parts just fight against each other relentlessly. Both sides believe they're right? I believe I'm right. You believe you're right. And so what is really right? And that's a hard part of this whole discussion. And I think the first piece of advice that I would say is, if you're going to get involved, and you should get involved in politics so that you know what's going on with the country, go online, right? Find on YouTube or whatever social media you like, find somebody that when you listen to them, your intuition tells you that this person is trying to give you a neutral perspective. That is really the best way to do it. You can go on YouTube, Instagram. I would be careful with X. That's a pretty brutal platform when it comes to politics. And you could get sucked into the void real quick. No bullshit. But on any of the other platforms, it's very easy to find people who are trying to be middle of the road and just say, this is what this side's saying, that's what that side's saying. You make up your mind. Because there's so many topics on the plate right now, right? We got immigration. There's big conversations around the whole transgender thing and how they're trying to, do things like make laws that would allow the school to take your kid and bring them somewhere and give them gender affirming care without your consent or without a warrant or without any type of, approval from anybody whatsoever. And that's how do you deal with that in spirituality, right? You want to take the highest perspective, but what really is the highest perspective of somebody kidnapping your kid and doing something to them that's against your beliefs, which I mean, it may not be, but still, it'd be pretty weird if somebody took your kid and you didn't object to it no matter what they did to them, right? If you drop your kid off at school, you plan to come and pick your kid up after school, full stop. But imagine they take your kid and you don't know where your kid's at. It takes you days to find out what's going on, and come to find out they fed your kid some chemicals and they're now labeled a them or whatever, they, them. It's tough, and I don't want anybody to be scared, right? None of this is to push you into fear, because in a spiritual community, with manifestation and all the teachings of that sort, we know that it's in our control to control our reality, right? But no one person, me, you, or anybody listening to this, can make the reality what it is for everyone, right? You can't make Republicans win. You can't manifest that by yourself. There's what's called the collective consciousness, and that is, it's a group of people, and there can be many collectives inside of the human race, right? Because you have all the various divisions, the male collective, the women collective, spiritual collective, religious collective, But when we're talking about, I'm trying to focus particularly on the American collective and politics, right? But even from a collective perspective, how do you deal with that? And I mean, going back to what I was saying, this isn't to cause fear, right? And you can't make the choice or decide the way any particular race is going to go on your own. So you need your comrades, right? Or do you? I don't really know. I'm here asking the questions like you, and I want to find out what you think. So do that down in the comments. Let me know what you think. Tell me your thoughts on all of this and how you would approach certain things. But when politicians are trying to make crazy ass decisions like that for me and you without our consent, right? Because I don't remember anybody coming out and really putting that on the table and say, hey, who would vote for this measure where we could kidnap your kid and do whatever we want to him? I don't think anybody on the planet, let alone America, would vote for that actually to pass. But the larger question is the highest perspective, right? Spirit always tells us, take the highest perspective. And what would that be in this case? How would you? Of course, all of us would say, well, vote no on that. But imagine a world where that passed or certain states had that. Of course, you wouldn't live there, but once one state has it, another one can get it, and another, and another. And then if nobody's putting up any resistance, it could go nationwide. So that's how I feel spirituality and even people in religion, I would say actually much less in religion. Religious people do tend to get into politics pretty deeply. The two are pretty heavily intertwined, but in the spiritual community, you get a lot of channelers and spirit and ETs even coming through and saying, just don't watch the news, it's poison. However, I don't think that they're trying to convey to us not to consume some type of media and inform yourself about what's going on in your general, neighborhood or state or government or whatever. Right? They're talking about the negative aspects of news and how it sucks you down a black hole. But when it comes to voting for a president, that's a pretty important thing. And how do we form as a community in spirituality? And where are we discussing this stuff? That's kind of my problem right now. There's not a lot of channels out there that are entertaining very 3D issues like what I'm talking today. Talking about, politics and transgenderism and what Second Amendment rights, First Amendment rights. We're not talking about that kind of stuff. And I really have a hard time believing that what Spirit is telling us to do is just don't be involved in any of that. Immerse yourself in spirituality and turn a blind eye and everything will be good in the end. It's a really good story. It sounds good. And I really would love it if that was the case, but I don't believe that for a second. I think all of us came down here, and the reason that we came down here is to experience a life where we perceive ourselves as separate from God. Because once you're on the other side, your soul knows. You know as a soul that you're connected to the all that is, right? All the information's available to you. So this 3D reality, Earth, is one of many places that were created for us to come down here and just be in perceived separation from God, right? We really think it. Of course, in spirituality, we don't so much. We know what is actually really going on. And so that veil is being cracked, and we're starting to venture into, the godly perspective, the Godhead perspective. And that's why I called this channel Omni-Awakened Evolution, because we're awakening in every direction possible. And this is literally the next step in the evolutionary cycle of humanity. You think about what channelers are doing. Yes, it's been around for practically ever. We had oracles way back in the day. And, so we can't call it an exactly new thing, but it was definitely heavily suppressed, right? Religion took the forefront, all that kind of stuff. You're a heretic, you were burned at stake, hung, and all kinds of horrible medieval shit that went down for that era. to people like us, all bad. But going back to the topic at hand, I'm going to have some guests on. Daniel Scranton's going to be on here. I think we got something going next week, and I'm going to have a handful of other people coming on, and I'm really want to take the podcast down the direction of not just bringing them on and having them tell us the information that Spirit and ET and everybody's bringing forth, and letting us know, what the best way to manifest. You guys have heard a lot of it. You guys follow all the same people I follow, but let's really get down into the nitty gritty of how to apply that into these topics. Do we vote? Don't we vote? Should we just become isolationists and turn our eyes away from all of that and just focus on good vibes and higher consciousness? I don't know. I don't have the answer. But I do follow politics heavy, and I want to know what's going on in the rest of the world. I follow geopolitics as well, because I want to know what other nations are doing, because it all affects us, right? We're all connected as humanity. Ultimately, the goal to get to everybody's peaceful on earth. We don't have wars anymore, and all the countries are ultimately very diplomatic and friendly to each other. I'd love to see that in this lifetime. Don't know if it's going to happen. However, the next guest that come on, I'm going to be pushing really how do we apply these teachings and their teachings to being effective humans on a 3D planet. Because you could buy into the whole going into the fourth and the fifth dimension and whatever that means, but our feet are still here on the planet, right? So we have to be present. Part of being present means being aware of what's going on around you. Right? Being in the here and now, not in the past, not what's coming, not in fear, not in regret, but being here in the moment, knowing what's going on around you and making the best conscious decisions that you can make at any given time of the now moment. And so that's what I want to press. Tell me what you guys think down in the description box. That's if you guys have any ideas of what you want to ask, any particular topics, I'd love to hear about it. And until I talk to you guys next time, peace out.